Dispatchers help callers on the worst days of their lives. For over 25 years, we've been there. A silent partner in millions of calls thanks to our redundant and diverse networks that ensure call delivery. Today, cities are bigger, traffic more congested, and the challenge is more complex. But you're never alone, because InDigital is quietly improving, implementing, and driving the next generation of 911, so you're supported in every situation. Make the switch at indigital.net.
My job is all about purpose.
Just the ability to make a difference, to help someone be able to go home at the end of the day.
My great-grandfather started the volunteer fire department in Springfield, Nebraska. My grandmother was a nurse. My uncle was a fire chief in Atlanta, Georgia. So somewhere down the line, it was my purpose to be doing this.
Yeah, we're a family here.
The data we get from Rapid SOS is life-saving.
Have you ever met a 911 professional and asked, what's the worst call you've ever taken? Well, here's your answer. I heard your last breath the night you flipped your four-wheeler. I tried to call you the day you committed suicide by driving your car into a tree. Blue face, cold to the touch. I helped you with CPR after you found your infant face down, not breathing. It messed me up. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. You were with me from the beginning, Grandma. 27 years later, I took the 911 call when you died. How fitting to be there for me in the beginning, and I was there for you in the end. I miss you, Grandma. I am 911. This is but a glimpse into the world of emergency dispatch. But what is it really like to answer a call during someone's nightmare? What is the impact of the first responder answering the call? Available on Amazon or where you purchase your favorite books and ebooks. Imagine listening. Your worst day is our everyday.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
I start to hear screaming. And I said, "Sir, are you okay?" And he said, yeah, I'm okay. And I said, "You told me there wasn't anybody else in the house." And he said, "There's not. That's my dogs." And I had to listen to those dogs scream because they were burning alive.
Jeez.
Yeah. And I left that morning and I bawled. I get emotional now. All the way home. And a good friend of mine who was on that department, I talked to him later that day, and he said, yeah, he said, that was pretty bad. He said, and it really pissed me off. The dogs were in a crate, just inside the door.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid SOS, and a big shout out to subscribers as always. And all of you who are watching, supporting, listening, and sharing, thank you for everything, because I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you very much. A lot of stuff has been happening, and it's currently November 4th, 2025. But depending on when this comes out, it might be later. So I'm not sure. But I'm currently here live at Cass County 911 in Michigan with Anthony, and we are about to get started with this episode. I'm excited to have you on, man. How are things going?
Things are good. We're moving along. The staffing is doing okay. Working on filling the last open spot, but we know we've got some retirements that are coming, so we'll enjoy it
course.
while we got it.
Exactly, yes. And Anthony's a supervisor here, but what I didn't get from you right off the bat was, how many years have you been in public safety?
So public safety altogether, I'm approaching 24 years.
24 years. Well done, man.
Yeah, 24 years in April. So
When you first started, did you think you'd be going this far?
no, and I definitely never envisioned myself being here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never really thought of myself as somebody who worked in an office space. I worked factory jobs and I worked some other stuff, but never this. And now I couldn't imagine anything different.
That's awesome. That is very cool. I think a lot of us ended up getting into public safety with that thought process that I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I'm going to try it and we're going to see what happens. But for you, how did you get involved in public safety to begin with?
So I was around the firehouse all my life. My dad was on the fire department. My uncle was on the fire department. So when I turned 17, they had formed a cadet program, which allowed me to get in. And then I actually took my fire training classes during my senior year of high school. So I did that at night after school. So I've been doing it ever since, but that was kind of how I got into it. And then that evolved into EMS. I worked as an EMT for probably 10 years. And then at the end of that was when I started here. So I've been here at dispatch altogether 13 years this month, full-time 12 years. I hit my 12-year mark in August.
Nice.
So
Do you remember growing up hearing a lot of that radio traffic?
all the time.
Yeah?
All the time, yeah.
Did it? So it piqued your interest right away then. I mean, what are some of the things that you remember seeing growing up?
I would tag along sometimes on calls if I happened to be with my dad and he would go, or, I'd hear the calls go out as a kid, running around on my bicycle. If it was, within 3 or 4 miles of my house, I get on the bicycle, I'd ride over, I'd check it out. It was one of those things that I did,
Yeah.
And so I always knew that I wanted to do the fire thing. EMS never really interested me. And after working through the calls and kind of seeing that side of it, I wanted to know more. I wanted to be able to do more. And so that's why I did that. And then burnout is real in EMS, very real. Mm-hmm. And I got to a point where I'm not sure I was as effective as I should be. And some other things happened along the way. And the director here at the time said, have you ever had any interest in doing this? And I said, sure. And so I went through the process. It took almost a year from the time I applied. They had hired one before me. And so it took almost a year from the time I applied to the time I worked my first training shift. And so that's actually 12 days from now would be the anniversary of the first training shift 13 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
I want to go back really quick because I've asked people this before. And so my dad wasn't in public safety or anything, but he knew everyone, all of the officers and stuff, mainly because one, he was a gang coordinator, but he worked with troubled youth, but he would go to the courts, downtown Allegan to the courthouse, and he would interpret for different people that were coming in. So he basically knew everything, knew everyone rather. And I couldn't get away with shit at home. In my little town of Fenville, I could not get away with anything. So here's question one. Were you able to get away with anything, seeing how your dad was in the fire department?
It's funny because at the time I thought I was getting away with things.
Of course, we all do, right?
I thought I was getting away with things, but in reality, he already knew.
Yeah.
He already knew. Actually, so funny story, I got stopped one time by a deputy from the sheriff's office and wrote me a ticket. I was speeding. I deserved it. And
at the time, I didn't feel like I did, but
Right. So my dad, I told him because I was actually headed up there for a fire prevention program, mm-hmm. and so I told him, and evidently, and I found this out later, but he made some phone calls, and so the ticket disappeared. I didn't know that. I still paid the ticket.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a life lesson for me. But, you know, I found out years later that there really wasn't ever a ticket. And so, yeah. So he got me on that. But it was a good lesson. So, but no, I thought I was getting away with things. I wasn't. He knew. And so, you know, my son is in the same boat, you know, and now it's not just the firehouse, you know, I work for the sheriff's office and, you know a lot of people, and it's like, there's no way you're going to get away with anything. And now I understand it. So.
It's those moments growing up and, but also the realization later on, we're like, wait, are you for real? Like that really happened? Okay. You had to learn a lesson, of course.
Right.
Of course. So, okay, so that was one. You know, you weren't really able to get away with a lot of things because you had a dad who was in public safety and everything else. What about growing up in that environment where you're going to school? Like, did it make you a little cooler that your dad was in the fire department, or did you get ragged on?
You know, I don't really remember a whole lot. I know that you know, at the time I thought it was cooler.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Yeah, and that's what I mean, because you know, kids sometimes are like, "Dude, it's so cool! Like, do you get to see this? Do you get to see that?" Or it's like, "Yeah, whatever."
Yeah, you know, and you know, sometimes you know the kids would ask questions about things, you know, and I thought I knew all the answers. I didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything. I was humbled
But it got
very
you some
quickly.
points up there on the ladder of school. Like,
Absolutely,
in
absolutely.
In your world.
You know, maybe the teachers thought that I was a little bit more behaved than what I actually was, just because of those things. I don't know. Yeah,
or maybe they thought you were rebellious because of that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that some of that probably stemmed from, you know, thinking that, you know, I couldn't get away with things, and so I'll show you, you know. But,
yeah.
You know, nonetheless, I turned out okay.
Now, going through all of this, having all this experience, and then, you know, you being asked, you know, have you ever thought about being on this side? You know, on this side of the radio, under the headset, like all of this, and you're like, sure. Did you, before that, or up until that point, where you had that sure response, did you get a chance? Had you sat in dispatch at all,
No.
or you just went in?
No, I had talked. I knew a couple of the dispatchers who worked here, and you know, I had talked to them about it. I want to say I had been in the building a time or two, but never really to spend any time in there to really see what was going on.
Yeah.
And so, you know, but in my head, and I'm sure this happens all over the place, you know, as a field responder, you think you know what's happening
Right.
in that room. You have no idea. So, you know, I say I was humbled when I went into fire class. I was definitely humbled when I came into here and had to go back and talk to the guys at the firehouse. Like, you guys really don't know what you're talking about. You know, there's so much more happening in there. You know, and for us, we've got 2 dispatchers on staff all the time. We're working towards a third for, you know, our busy times of the day. Mm-hmm. But, you know, they're dispatching for 13 fire departments, 5 different EMS agencies, all the different police agencies, the sheriff's office, all the local police, the state police, that kind of stuff. Just because one emergency is happening here doesn't mean another one isn't happening there. And that's what I tell these guys. And your scene isn't the most important scene, it's a scene.
Right.
Amongst a bunch of scenes, potentially. So, you know, you'll get those guys that call in on the radio because they need something and the dispatcher can't get to them right away, you know, and then they come back on and, you know, their voice is elevated, or, you know, there's sarcasm in their voice or whatever. And the dispatchers here do a good job of getting them what they need and, you know, maybe putting them in their place a time or two. You know, it happens.
It does. Yeah, no, it does. So you end up, so when you actually stepped into the dispatch center, was this after, I don't know, did you have an interview, or do you just came in and they're like, we're just going to show you, and if you want to do it, you can do it?
So I came in and I met with the director, and I did the test that they had and all that. And then we had an interview. And then it was a long time of, you know, I filled out the background information and all of that stuff. And it was a lot of emails back and forth, you know, because like I say, it was quite some time.
Yeah.
You know, where are things at? Are things moving forward? because the more I thought about it, after going through the initial part of it, I really kind of started looking into it and what all that entailed, and I was very intrigued. And so, it was, I wanted to know what the other side of the radio looked like. And so I came in and did more observation, anything for the first couple shifts, when I was starting my training, and learned very quickly how much I didn't know about what goes on in that room. And so then it was like, okay, I got to take this serious, because there's so much to this, and if I mess it up, there's so much on the line. And so that changed my whole perspective, and that's when I really started putting it out to people that I knew, like some of them would say, well, what kind of money do you make there? So I would say, and they're like, wow, that's pretty good. And I'm like, but what I've learned is they're not paid well for what they do. They're paid well for what they're prepared to do.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, it always seems to work out when somebody comes in to sit in shadow or sit and just kind of observe and see what's going on. Nothing happens. Nothing happens.
Yes.
And so occasionally, we'll get them, and it's busy, and the phone doesn't stop ringing, and the radio's going off, and they've got 17 things going on at once, and they walk out, and their eyes are just huge, because they can't process what they just experienced. And that was kind of me, in the beginning, when those things started happening, because I started, late in the year, so snow started happening, and car accidents, things like that.
Because everyone forgets how to drive in the snow.
Nobody remembers that
here for years.
Yeah, everybody thinks that the meetings are in the ditch, and
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Michigan and probably other states where it snows, we have what we call ditch time.
Yeah.
So make sure you leave early, just in case you go into a ditch. That's what ditch time means. Try saying that in a southern state, and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, and then you explain, and oh, yeah, well, we don't get snow here. Well, that's why you don't understand. I'm sure they have their own equivalent of it, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I don't know a lot about, how the southern states operate, but, my understanding is that, there's a couple flakes and things close.
Exactly, yes.
So
everything closes down. Yes, you are correct. I remember growing up, I was a teenager, we would travel to Texas every year, and we are in Austin, and there was actually like an ice storm that happened, and we're watching the news, and all of these cars are just like sliding everywhere, man. And we're chuckling because we know how to drive through that. And my dad goes, well, we're going to go to the mall. And they go, everything's closed. The mall's not going to be open. We went, and it was open. You could get into the building, but the majority of the stores were closed. They were like, oh, they were right. Because, yeah, they don't have snow plows. They don't have salt or anything to put down. I think eventually they had trucks going out and putting sand, but it wasn't anything. And we're driving like nothing, and our cousins are going, how are you doing this? Like, because we're from Michigan. Like, we know how to drive through this. So you end up getting in there. You see what it's like, and obviously, there were things probably that maybe surprised you a little bit from what it sounds like, your conversations with others in the fire service, and saying, you have no idea what goes on in there. What were some other things that surprised you going in?
I think probably one of the biggest things, so to fast forward in my training a little bit, I started taking 911 calls. I came into work one day, and my trainer said, you're going to answer 911s today. No warning. And he no more than got that out of his mouth, and a 911 went off. And I thought he was messing with me.
Right.
I just thought he was giving me shit.
Right, yeah.
And he's like, no, get that. And I'm like, okay. And I answered. And I couldn't tell you what the call was. But, the biggest thing that I learned is just because it's a 911 ring doesn't mean it's a 911 call.
True.
And that was a big misconception that I had, coming into this. And so I use that a lot with our new trainees. I'm like, just because it's the 911 call is no different than an admin line. It just sounds different when the phone rings. You're going to treat it the same way. Mm-hmm. You're going to go through your line of questioning. You're going to go through your EMD protocols. You're going to, but that was that was a big misconception for me, was that, if 911 rings, somebody, has an emergency. But that's also coming from, and I knew like we would get sent to things that weren't necessarily what was reported and things like that. But again, not knowing what happens on this side of the radio, that's just how I thought about it. I was surprised by how many different passwords I had. Lots of passwords, and they change, all the time.
Yes.
So all the different systems, all the different things to, that was, remembering that I had this to look into to find information, and that to look into, and I can use this form, and it was information overload.
Right.
And you start to hit that wall where you're like, I'm not quite sure if I can make a go at this. And then all of a sudden the lights come on and everything makes sense.
Right.
You're never gonna know everything, but you can get into a really good rhythm, and that's what ended up happening. So the interesting thing from my training perspective is I was training. So my trainer's partner was the person who got hired before me, and so he had 7 or 8 months of working, and so my trainer gave me what I needed, but let me be partners with his partner. And he taught me a lot that he had picked up, and tips and tricks along the way. And so it was unique for me in that aspect that, he was fresh out of training, but he remembered it, and he was very good at communicating. And so I learned a lot from my trainer, but I learned a lot more from my partner. And we ended up being partners for 4 years, and we were the shift everybody wanted to come to. It was fun. We had a great rhythm, and then I got switched, and I didn't like that.
Yeah, that always sucks when the party's over, in a sense.
Yeah, because you don't realize how connected you are to people.
Right, exactly.
And so I was told, it'll make you a better dispatcher. It's good for you, and I didn't believe it at the time. It really did. It really did help, and it was worth the switch.
What are some of the other earlier calls that you remember when you first started taking calls? Because I know, like for myself, there were some times where non-emergency calls, I would answer those while in training, and especially right when I got off and I wasn't in training anymore, but there were a few while in training that I took that were non-emergency, or through the non-emergency line, that is, and they ended up being suicidal callers. We had an old phone system. Now, this is 2005, 2006, and this phone system did not have caller ID. So if someone is calling on the non-emergency line and they hang up, there's no way for me to get a hold of that person. And there were a couple times where some of those non-emergency calls came in that way. And I remember looking over at my trainer, and my trainer just kind of throws her hands up because she goes, there's nothing we can do other than hope and pray that this person calls back either on 911 or on a non-emergency line again. Because even if you ask immediately, like we do in our line of questioning, your phone number and all of that, how am I gonna get a hold of that person if I don't have that? If they almost immediately hang up, if they call up and they say, I want to kill myself, and then hang up, and you're like, oh no, I don't have a way to get that information. Or on 911, as you're saying, I had the same misconception where I was thinking, okay, every single call that comes in on 911 is going to be crazy. And then someone calls in on 911 and they go, oh, it's actually not an emergency, but I was wondering if you could tell me when the parade times are going to be. And I'm sitting there, oh, okay. We're not freaking out here. This isn't an emergency, but they're calling on 911.
It's like when they call and ask what time the fireworks start.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really hard to not give them that answer in such a way that they understand your sarcasm. They start at dark. I'm not quite sure what time that is, but I'm sure you can Google what time does sunset.
A lot of my partners would say, yeah, it's at dusk. What time is that? I'm like, just when it gets dark.
My response usually is, I could Google that for you, or you could Google it yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's like the light kicks on in their head, and they're like, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're like, yeah, could you do that? And I'm like, yeah, sure.
I can't explain it sometimes, but it definitely happens. It definitely happens. Do you remember some of those other early calls that you were taking? Maybe not your first call, but some of the earlier ones where either it was during training or you just got off of training. Because I feel like when we just get off of training, that is when some of the stuff starts coming in right away. Almost as if the dispatch gods or the universe is like, hey, welcome to dispatch.
Yeah. So, one of the calls that I remember, it was during training. We had a call from a guy, at least I believe it was a guy, and this was before Rapid SOS or any of that stuff. So you might get a phase 1 or a phase 2. We got a call from this guy who was in severe respiratory distress, and so I'm trying to get his address from him. He's not able to give me his address. I can tell he's having a really hard time breathing. And then he kind of goes quiet. And luckily, the phase 2 that we got was on a dead-end road. It was just a short dead-end road around one of the lakes. And so there were 4 houses on that road. So we dispatched EMS and we sent police also, because we didn't know which house it was. We're trying to cover as much ground as we could as quickly as possible. Because I could hear the guy kind of breathing in the background. So they got out there and they started knocking on doors, and 3 houses they actually answered the door, and it wasn't there, so that left them with the one, and luckily it was the right house, and they were able to get in and take care of this guy. But I mean, it was a horrible feeling, and I'm looking at my trainer thing and like, what kind of tricks do you have in your bag, and he's like, that's it, this is what we've got. So that one worked out.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I can only imagine how many didn't.
Right, exactly. And so, and I'm glad too. That was probably pretty gnarly, right? Going into it and thinking that's it. But it ended up having this good outcome,
Right.
which was good. But you're right. What about the amount of calls that come in that don't have that part of it, where that outcome isn't it? So for those who are watching and listening, and don't quote me on this because I don't remember exactly, but when we're talking about phase 1 and phase 2, it's wireless phase 1 and phase 2, and this is for cell phones. So before all of this newer technology and everything came out, and again, I don't remember the exact number, so I'm just ballparking this, but wireless phase 1, it goes off of the address of the tower, and like the cell phone tower, and I believe it was between 3 to 12 mile radius of where you could potentially be standing or where your emergency could be. And we would have the chance to get a hold of the cell phone companies to see if they could get a better location, but it always didn't work. And wireless phase 2, I think, would put you within a 3 mile radius, but that's a triangulation of 3 different towers going to where you are in the middle. Again, I don't remember if those are the actual numbers. It's probably changed now since my time in dispatch, but that's basically what it was. But that's what you worked with. And if you could get closer, awesome. If not, you'd have to send an officer out to check the area, and hopefully they find the person.
Yeah, this one dialed in. It was probably 1,000 feet. I mean, it was, like I say, it dialed down to that one small road.
Yeah.
So we knew we were close. We were in the
yeah.
ballpark anyway. So it was just, I don't have an address for you, but I need you to go start checking these houses on this street. Somewhere there, somebody is having issues.
Jeez. Yeah, and then that's when, the officers are like, okay, we're at this address knocking and talking. We're going to the next address. How did it feel? Do you remember like a feeling of relief?
Oh, absolutely.
When they found them?
Absolutely. Another one that I had. So this taught me a lesson very early. This was after I was released from training. Verify, right? And so I take a call, and it's a difficulty breathing call, but I'm talking to the person who's having the issues, and I hit the 911 button, so it pulls the information into the CAD, it drops in. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I drop the call and I dispatch the ambulance to the address. Except the ambulance goes and says, we don't see this address. I never verified the address. Luckily, where I sent them was about a mile west of where the call actually was. I called the caller back, got the information, and sent them. But I'll never forget that, because what if that would have been a life-threatening situation? That extra time could have made the difference. And so that call sticks with me a lot. And that's anytime I go sit at the desk, I remember that, and I always verify.
Oh man, there are moments like that where it ends up sticking with us, to where it's almost where you like, this is my call type. Like, this is the type that not that you wouldn't do it for any of the others, but because that specifically happened with that, and that sticks with you, like, that's your call. Like for me, it was domestic calls. I was early on when I was just about to be done with training, and I couldn't get the stupid CAD call to go through because the incident type wasn't right. And that old CAD system, which for those watching and listening, the CAD system or computer-aided dispatch, that's where we're typing all of the stuff to send out to the officers so that they have the information. If you didn't have the call type right, you couldn't move on. If you didn't have the ORI or the township code, you couldn't actually put it in there. And I remember covering my microphone and saying to my trainer, you're gonna have to take over this call. And she goes, no, take a deep breath, you've got this.
Letting you tread water.
Yes, yeah, man, exactly. Letting me tread water, taking in some water, but not letting me drown. And I did. I took a deep breath and I got it in, and that was a learning lesson as well. That stuck with me. And I thought, man, every domestic call that comes in, like, it made it that much more personal to me, because I had that moment where I froze because I couldn't get that in. And I was like, no, need to tag you in. But she did what she had to do. And I think all of us have a moment like that where that type of call or whatever it is, like, that stays with us, so that, like, no, I'm never going to do that again. Right. Because I had that moment.
I felt horrible.
Yeah.
You know, that I'd sent them. I sent them out of their way. They were so much closer. And yeah, so I think about that, you know, like, what if that would have been, and I tell that to the dispatchers. I tell them that story. I'm like, this is my story, but if it helps you remember, use it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Do you feel like there was a moment, whether it be early on or just throughout your career, especially in dispatch, what we're talking about now, that really solidified that you were in the right place?
You know, I don't know that it was a moment. I think that it was just a kind of a culmination of all of the training and all the experiences and all of the people, right? The people that I work with. You know, where I enjoyed getting ready to go to work. You know, I mean, every other place that I've been, you know, was a job. You know, I gotta go, I gotta clock in, and that's that. You know, but I really looked forward to coming to work. I was out early on. I don't even know that I was full time yet, but I had to have surgery. I had appendicitis, and I had to call off on Easter weekend, and nobody complained. They picked up the shifts, you know, and I was like, wow, these people actually really care, you know? And so, because I was still the new guy, you know, I shouldn't be calling off, you know, especially on a holiday weekend. You know, they have plans, they've got families, you know, things like that. And so, yeah, that was when I really first felt like I was part of the team. And so it was, it's never really felt like a job to me. It's always been, you know, outside of training, you know, it was what it was, but, you know, training or doing the job, it's never felt like a job. I enjoy it. So.
That's pretty awesome. I think that, I think we've all hit that stride. But of course, there are those moments as well where you hit burnout, some version of burnout, and you have to figure out how to come back from that. It's not that you don't like what you're doing. There's just whatever is in the environment, whatever it is that's going on, whether it be low morale, county politics, you name it, can bring things down, and you start to get, excuse me, some sort of a form of burnout. I know for myself, it had to do with, it was 2007, it's going through my burnout, trying to figure things out, and it was after I took that call from when my grandmother passed away, which today's the 4th, so about 7 days will be the anniversary of when I took that call, when she passed away. But that was kind of like the catalyst for me to figure out me. And it was doing all of these projects that had to do with dispatch that really pulled me back in. Have you, because you mentioned that, it's easy to get burned out in EMS and stuff, and you were going through all of these different things. It seems like through that burnout that you had, where my version of that, it was going back to school and doing all these projects. It seems like your version of it was now coming into dispatch, seeing another side of public safety, and serving in a way that you maybe didn't realize that you could off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, and that was, it was a great step for me. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I went through a burnout phase in dispatch. Within the first 5 years, I really contemplated finding something else to do. And, but I wanted to give it time. I wanted to make sure, one way or the other, I was going to do what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And that lasted probably 4 to 6 months, where I was like, I just don't know, I felt like I was at a fork in the road, where do I continue down this road, or do I, and so I did a lot of thinking about that kind of stuff, and what this place offers, and what I don't know what I was going to go do. And there was just, again, I go back to, it was still fun to come to work. It was the other things, it was the politics. It was, and not necessarily within the center itself, but there's politics, at the county level, and you're never going to have everything go your way.
Right.
And so, and I don't know that was really the expectation, but I really sorted through everything and came to the conclusion that I was doing a lot of good here, and this is a great group of people. And so, it was just a phase, but I need to stay here. And staying here, I was able to promote, and so now I'm helping in a different way, and I love what I do. I'll retire doing this for sure.
That's amazing, man. I love it. It seems like you've gone through really a roller coaster of emotions throughout your public safety career, with just everything from the beginning up into what you're doing now, and of course some of the stuff that we talked about offline as well, which we'll get to some of that as we just kind of talk about some technology and everything, but more so how you feel like it's changed from the beginning to now, just in generalities. But what I want to ask you, as I mentioned, this roller coaster of emotions, all of these different types of calls, everything that you've experienced, the things that stick with you, and of course, as long as you feel comfortable talking about it, but a call that sticks with you. Like we all have probably numerous calls that stick with us, but there's always one or two that is just there.
Yeah, I've got two. The worst one for me doesn't involve people. I'm a dog person, and so anyway, it was early morning. It was I probably had an hour, maybe 2 hours left of my shift. I take a call from a guy who says that his house is on fire, and so I go through and he can't leave the property. He's he's got a bracelet on and he can't go anywhere. But I tell him, get out of the house, don't go back in. And I ask him, is there anybody in the house? He said, no, I'm the only one. And I said, okay. So we've got the fire department going. It's really not far from them. And I start to hear screaming. And I said, sir, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm okay. And I said, you told me there wasn't anybody else in the house. And he said, there's not. That's my dogs. And I had to listen to those dogs scream because they were burning alive.
Jeez.
Yeah. And I left that morning and I bawled. I get emotional now. All the way home. And a good friend of mine who was on that department, I talked to him later that day, and he said, yeah, he said that was pretty bad. He said, and it really pissed me off. The dogs were in a crate, just inside the door. He could have got those dogs. He could have, and I'm not faulting the guy, obviously I wasn't there and I don't know what he saw. But in my head, I think, man, I can't tell you to go back in. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you to do any of those things. In my mind, I'd like to think that, I'd at least try. But yeah, that was rough. And I remember that call like it was yesterday. The other one that I took was just a couple of years ago. A lady called in, and she said that she needed an ambulance. She needed to go to the hospital, and she was intoxicated. And I said, okay. And so I kind of dug into it a little bit deeper, and she told me she was an alcoholic. She had a problem. She was supposed to go to rehab the next day. She said, but I'm gonna have a drink, and I don't want to have a drink. And I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, you're already there. Well, I have very close ties to that in my personal life. Not me personally, but somebody I'm close to. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to connect with her and just talk through it with her until I could get an ambulance and an officer there just to kind of help her. And again, it was one of those where I hang up the phone and the emotions come in. And so I just stepped outside and made a phone call and then moved on. But yeah, that call sucked too, because I know what it's like for a person who's going through that and how tough that is and how much courage that took for her to call and get that help. Because, that could have gone another way. And I was glad that I was the one to take that call and be able to talk her through it. And, I connected with her because I told her, like, I have experience with this, and I'm not going to get into who it is or, anything like that. But it gave me that ability. And so it's calls like that for me that just reinforce my why, right? It doesn't happen all the time, and I may not be the one to be able to take the call, but if I am and I can help, that's what's important.
Thank you right off the bat for sharing both of those stories. And I think I've said this to you before, but I'll say it again. And I know I've said it on this podcast many times, but I'm a firm believer that there are some phone calls that are meant for us.
Absolutely.
Because of whatever experience we have in our past that allows us to connect deeper, faster with our caller to get them the help that they need as fast as possible. And in this sense, if it were between you and I taking those calls, I would not have been the good choice for that. Not saying that I wouldn't have done a good job to the best of my ability and experience, but that was obviously meant for you. It sounds like you had that experience of people. You straight up told this person, yeah, I I have an experience with this. I know, and you were able to connect and talk to that person way better than anybody else would have been able to do so.
Yeah, the whole conversation changed when I told her that. And so it worked.
You probably could hear or even feel that vibe of,
absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
sigh of relief of the person.
Well,
like,
you know,
I know this person
they-
I'm talking
they
to
get it.
knows. Yeah.
They get it. Yeah. Yeah.
You ever sit and think about the profession that we're in, and moments like that, where it just happens to be that you're connecting with someone and they're putting all of this trust in your voice.
Yeah.
But how deep we can connect with people sometimes, total strangers.
It's amazing.
How it's crazy to think how connected we all are, especially in those moments of need, and you can just feel it from people.
And it's funny, you talk about the voice. One of the things that I was always talked to about, and still occasionally it may happen a time or two, but tone, and my boss says, I know that you're not meaning it to sound the way that it sounds.
Yeah.
But I'm very, I want to get the information from you because I want to get it out. I want to get you help.
Yes.
And so, but I'll catch myself occasionally, and I'm like, start over,
Yeah.
and then it still works out, but I wasn't very cognizant of that until she said something to me, and I was like, I don't think so. And then she would send me audio, and I was like, I sound like an asshole.
Like, you know what? Maybe you're right.
I sound like an asshole, and I'm gonna work on that.
Yeah.
And so, she kept to sending me those different things, good and bad.
Yeah.
And so that helped me a ton. And so now I've taken that tool and I use it also. And and I'm like, but listen, I did the same thing. So you're not alone in this, but you can get better.
Right.
We can always improve.
Exactly. That's what's good about having a good support system and people that actually care, because she could have just let you, burn.
Yeah.
Just let you go down, and then, hey, now you got a paper trail of sounding like an asshole on the phone
Right.
and stuff. No, we want you to stay. We want you to improve. We want you to see how powerful you are in just your voice because of your tone. Because
Right.
it might be the very first time that someone calls and you have a certain tone, even though you're not meaning to have a certain tone. But also, I think that's the other thing too, when it goes to the media and they like chop up these clips.
Absolutely.
And they're like, this person doesn't care at all. But there's so many things, and don't get me wrong, all those who are watching and listening, I'm not saying this to say this is the way it is. That's not the way it is. There are some folks that are assholes, and some of those folks don't need to be working in this profession.
Right.
But there are some other calls and circumstances where, maybe that person just listened to a mom screaming because their infant just died on the phone with them. And then they took the next call and their tone was a little off. But you don't know that person just listened to someone's kid die.
Right.
Like, there are some things that are like that happen. That's why I need to explain, because I don't want people to be like, oh, he's just doing this or that. No, there are different circumstances. There are different things that happen. And so, yeah, it could be that very first time that someone calls, and maybe you took a call where a baby died, and your tone is a little off, and you don't mean to sound a certain way. But also at the same time, we have to keep it in the back of our minds, because if it is that person's first time calling, they might not ever call again.
Right.
Because maybe, just hypothetically speaking, maybe they were going through a domestic violence issue. They're dealing with enough bullshit at home and they're calling for help.
Right.
And then they hear a similar tone or something that triggers them, and they're like, well, I can't find help anywhere.
Yeah, nobody's going to help me.
How crazy
don't
is
get it.
that,
Yeah.
man? Like, but also at the same time, how much pressure is that?
Oh, so much pressure.
Right.
And you think about it, I look at it now and it's like, I feel like I've got a good grasp on things,
Mm-hmm.
But I still catch myself occasionally where the tone is off, and our words are so powerful.
Yes.
You know, they can make or break an incident with so little. And so you have to be cognizant of that. You have to listen to yourself while you're listening to these people, you know, and that's a big thing with, you know, because we all have home lives, right? We all have things that happen at home. We all have different stresses and different things that are happening. You got to leave it at the door. Mm-hmm. It can't affect you here, you know, and occasionally, you know, I mean, I may hear somebody and, you know, I can tell, you know, they're just having a bad day. Like, hey, come have a chat. Let's talk about it. You know, just try to change their perspective, or I'll, you know, find a funny video on Facebook or something, and I'll go out there and I'll play it for them, you know, and get them to laugh a little bit, you know, just to try to change it up for them, you know, maybe take their mind off that for a second where they fall back into, you know, doing what they normally do. Right. So.
Yeah. And that's also not to scare anyone. Yeah, that's a lot of pressure and stuff, but this is what we do.
Absolutely.
And love doing it. And there are so many more resources and so many things that people talking about it more. That's why conversations like this are important, so that people hear this and that they know that there is help, or that people do understand what is going on. Reach out if you need to. There are people there that care, man. And I love that you will pull them off for a moment or show them a funny video, like you said, to kind of break them out of whatever funk is going on. I think the dispatch universe or dispatch God's world, however you want to put it, sometimes do that for us. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't, but I feel like, at least during my time in the profession as a dispatcher and call taker, I would take crap call after crap call after crap call. The dispatch gods are like rolling the dice and they're like, here's a funny one for you. And you don't think about it at the time because there's so much going on, but you think, you know what? I actually needed that.
Yeah.
I needed that break of chaos with that person calling about, you know, a raccoon that was chasing them, or, you know, something that just seems so outrageous, but mentally, you need that.
You gotta have that.
Right.
It's so important. So, I mean, in some shifts you don't get it.
Right.
You know, it may take several shifts, and then all of a sudden something happens, and you're like, "Did that really just happen? Like, did I just take that call?"
Right.
And then everything kind of melts. You know. So yeah. No, I totally agree. It has a funny way of, you know, giving it to you for a little while, and then it's like, all right, we'll cut you a break.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's like the universe balances out. There's always some sort of balance, the light versus the dark. Like, there's always some sort of balance. So with all of that said, how do you feel like the profession has changed you? A big old sigh. You're like, wow, how much time do you have?
I think the biggest way that public safety in general has changed me is I overanalyze everything.
Yeah.
I look at situations from the standpoint of, how could this go wrong? And then, are there ways to mitigate those risks before doing it, right? You know, we went on a family trip a couple years back, and it was my son's first time on an airplane. And he wanted the window seat, and, you know, we did the whole thing, and, you know, we have that weird sense of humor. And so we start going down the runway. And I look over and I said, well, either we make it or we don't. And he just kind of looked at me, and I said, you know, it's out of our control. And I like to be in control type of person, you know, whether it be a vehicle or, you know, whatever. I like that control. But it's really good to fly, because it forces you to let go of that and realize that that's okay too. So I overanalyze everything, and my kid hates it, because I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but, you know, and so yeah, I think that's probably the biggest way. But I kind of lost my compassion for people when I was working EMS full time, because I feel like there's such an abuse of that system. And coming into this profession, I think I found that again. I obviously we all take calls that, you know, we're like, that's bullshit, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But most people, I think, at least in their own mind, it's a serious situation. And so, you know, I was able to find my compassion for people again by coming to 911. And so, you know, I think that's probably two ways that my perspectives have changed because of this.
I love that. I always like to ask, because I'm the same way, overanalyzing that, or if when someone's walking by and I'm just like looking outside, and my daughters will go, "What are they doing?" I'm like, "Nothing, just in case." It could be a dog walking by. I'm like, just in case, you know, something's going on, because I mean, you don't know, anything could happen. So my thought process is, there's a car that comes around, that visits one of these houses on our cul-de-sac. And the reason most of the time, well, all the time, when I'm watching people walking by, it's not because I think they're suspicious, it's because I know that car comes hauling ass through there when they shouldn't be. And I'm hoping that no one ends up getting hit, but if someone does, I can run out there to assist.
Right.
And there's always little kids playing around. So if I see a dog running by and my daughter's like, "Oh, it's such a cute dog," I'm like, "Yeah," but I'm watching to make sure that the dog doesn't run after those little kids that are playing there. Because, yeah, I'm overanalyzing, or I'm just running scenarios in my head.
Constantly.
Right.
Constantly.
Thanks, 911.
Yeah.
But those things do help as well. The dispatch ear.
You know, but that's a blessing and a curse.
It is. It is true.
You know, because you're walking through like a crowded place and you hear something, you're like, "Did I just hear that?" You know, and then like sometimes you just kind of want to hover. Because that was interesting, you know, it's random things that you'll hear people say.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Or on the other side, the hotel that I stayed at last night, you know, few rooms down the hallway, you don't always want to hear everything that's going on.
Right.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Blessing and a curse.
For the, just over 2 decades that you've been in public safety, how do you feel, or how do you, I guess just, your thoughts on the technology from the beginning to the way it is now? Because for a long time, I mean, you were seeing all of this awesome technology going around just in life in general, and then people would say, "Well, how come 911 can't do this? How come they can't do this?" And then it hit, and it continues to build and move fast and move fast and move fast. I wasn't working, and I got out of dispatch just as text to 911 was coming in. So from that on, I mean, there's been such a technology surge in 911, but thinking about from the beginning of your career to the way it is now, how has technology changed?
It looks nothing like it used to. Mm-hmm. Nothing in that center is even remotely close to what it was when I started. And again, it's only been 13 years. Mm-hmm. The radio systems are upgraded and more reliable. The location services, the fall detection, the crash detection, all of these places that we're pulling the data from and harnessing it to use for the dispatchers, you know, is so much better. It's faster, it's more reliable, and they know how to use it. Mm-hmm. They're really good at it. And so, you know, I think I told you earlier, you know, knowing how it's changed in the first half of my career, I can only imagine what it's going to look like by the time I'm ready to retire. It may not look anything like it does now.
Very true. And the reason I say this too is because I remember the last year, I believe, that I was in dispatch. Google Glass had been introduced, and it wasn't, I think there were, I guess, what we would call early influencers who were able to get it, to check it out, and they were making videos and stuff. This is like 2012 maybe, going into 2013. And I remember a demo video, and it was really short. I mean, it was the video in general was like a minute and a half, but this one specific piece was just a few seconds. And it was showing a dispatcher wearing the Google Glass, and on the screen was someone who had fallen, and somebody else was there with them. And they were calling for help on 911. And I remember thinking, damn, what if it is like that? It's 2025 now, and it's not like that.
Right.
But I mean, look at what's going on with, Elon Musk and the Neuralink and, chips and all this other stuff. I mean, this is like futuristic sci-fi shit. I'm not saying that's happening. This is hypothetically speaking. Like, what if it were like that? What if now your video feed is coming into like where it's in your head? Dude, that would be horrible though, because now the mental health and wellness piece is way up there.
They're going to need to make bigger budgets.
Oh, for real. Yes. So many more resources, so many more things. But yeah, you're right. Even just 5 years from now, what does 911 look like?
It's kind of scary to think about because of all the technology that's out there, the things that are coming. Centers are adopting AI. There's just so many new things. And we're just trying to figure out how to make it work for us. And,
right.
I mean, I'm excited for it. If it's going to make their jobs easier, make them faster and more efficient.
Why not?
Let's explore it.
Yeah.
If it works, it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
We can afford it. Let's do it.
And I think that what a lot of people, and we kind of talked about this before we started recording, but a lot of people, what they're afraid of is that AI is somehow going to take their job. They're going to take it's going to take what they do. And I keep telling people, don't worry about it. See AI more of like a Pokemon,
yeah,
like a companion, right? Who's just assisting you do all of these different things.
Right.
And because the piece that will always remain is that of being a human. Right. The humanity piece, like that is the most important piece. And I've spoken to a lot of people who are on the tech side as well. And they're like, yeah, this is just to assist, to be a companion. It will never take place. It's just like text to 911 will never take place of a voice call, because voice is always best. People need to look at texting to 911 as the last resort, or certain situations. Like if someone breaks into your house and you're hiding, do you want to call and make noise? If you have another option to text, that's the type of thing, those last resorts. It's not supposed to take place. So think about it that way. But yeah, technology is just
it's exploding.
Yeah, it's exploding. It took a little while, right?
Sure.
It took a little while for it to kick in, but it has kicked in. And even with that, there's not even full like funding, right, for next generation 911 stuff. Even though everyone's already doing it, they need more funding, just like everyone else. But man, 5 years.
Yeah.
It's gonna be crazy.
We'll meet again in 5 years, and we'll look
I
back.
know, right? we'll have our self-lacing Nikes and inside out
the
pants
hover,
and the hoverboard. We'll have our DeLorean outside. Like, we finally can time travel.
You know how many people won't get that?
I know, right? How sad is that? That there's probably a bunch of people who have no idea what we're talking about.
And I love it.
Yes. Yeah. My kids would know because I have shown them all of that stuff.
Yeah, my son would, for sure.
Yeah, us saying hoverboard, people are probably thinking of the ones that they have
with the wheels
with the wheels. Yeah.
No.
Marty McFly, Doc Brown, Back to the Future, Steven Spielberg, and Zemeckis, like all of that stuff. It has been awesome to have you on and talk with you and learn more about your story. But I've got one last question for you as we go into the wrap up of this. And that question is, throughout all of your time, and maybe we'll focus on the dispatch piece. Mm-hmm. If you could go back in time to talk to yourself in the beginning of your dispatch career, what would you tell yourself? And also, I have to say, this isn't to change anything, because there's a lot of things that we go through, hard lessons, decisions, all of that stuff, that lead us to the person that we are today, that if we did change, even tweak one little thing, it might obliterate a bunch of stuff, right?
Right.
As we're talking about Back to the Future and all of that. But if you could go back and just talk to yourself, maybe even to give yourself some advice or something, what would you tell yourself?
Be patient. Be more patient. Give yourself more grace. Don't be so hard on yourself. It's really hard not to beat yourself up, especially in the beginning, because you're literally absorbing so much information. And even though the training period isn't a short training period. I mean, you can't walk into this job and 3 weeks later you're good to go. It just doesn't work that way. But it's so easy to get down on yourself and try to hold yourself to the standard of the people you're working with when you're nowhere near there. And so, yeah, be more patient, give yourself more grace. It's all going to be fine.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you again very, very much, man, for what you do, for you guys also allowing me back over here to record and everything. This has been a lot of fun. And I can't wait to see everything else that happens here, the continued growth, and some of the stuff that you and I were talking about offline, just moving up and such.
Yeah.
I look forward to it, man. Thank you for everything.
Thank you very much.
So for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments or questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, whether you are new to dispatch, seasoned, or retired, I would love to share your story and have you on the show. I've been doing this for over a decade, and it is my passion, and I love every second of it. But I also thank you for your trust in sharing your stories too. So if you ever want to be a guest, comments, questions, anything like that, you can simply go to links, and that's links with 2i's.co/IM911. You will find everything on there. The link to schedule an episode, or to hear the latest episodes of the Within the Trenches podcast, as well as the Imagine Listening podcast, and also the free link to the Trenches community, where I have over 200 hours worth of free continuing education. You can find all of that there. Once again, it is links with 2i's.co/IM911. Big shout out to our sponsors in digital, as well as Rapid SOS, and also all of you who are here watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as X and LinkedIn. And there's also clips on Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, as well as TikTok. And then you can listen to both podcasts 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you all in the next one.
Imagine listening to someone's worst day every single day. Imagine listening as someone experiences life, through their worst nightmare to the miracle of birth or a life saved. I'm Ricardo Martinez, a former 911 dispatcher, and for years I've been recording the voices of a hidden world, ours. I've provided a space for 911 dispatchers to share their powerful stories. It started as a peer support session and continues. Dispatchers sitting together, sharing out loud, or writing down what they couldn't say. Some stories will grip you. Stories of heartbreak, resilience, and calls that haunt us long after the line goes quiet. But Imagine Listening is more than heavy emotion. It's about healing. It's about laughing through the chaos, lifting each other up, and reminding the world that dispatchers are human too. The lighthearted will balance the heavy. Experience the power of storytelling, a podcast for the thin gold line and those who want to understand it. This is Imagine Listening. Your worst day is our everyday. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.